The BWI Daily Edition back on a Monday. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Today we're taking a look at some fun topics for Penn State football as they enter their second full week of training camp here in August. Dave Eckert, Blue White Illustrated writer, with me today. We're also going to get a quick hoops update about recent commitments to the Nittany Lions program and kind of just a check-in with basketball in general amongst a couple of other things going on at Blue White Illustrated. So first off, Dave, how you doing today? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing great. You know, it's Monday. We're getting through it. I'm excited to be here. So happy to get into it.
Yeah, let's get that energy up. Nothing gets energy like bringing your own juice, right? Like we're going to go play in Northwestern at 11 a.m. Got to bring your own juice on a Monday. So there was a really fun couple of articles that you guys did. I believe it was late last week or this weekend, in terms of the guys that you thought were going to be breakout players. There was a round table on who you thought was going to be the breakout player on offense and defense, and I wanted to be a part of the fun, so I wanted to give mine, but I also wanted to bring you on to talk about your breakout players for 2020. I'm sorry, for 2021, and get your thoughts a little more in depth on why you picked those players. So let's get into it here on the BWI Daily Edition. Your breakout player for the Penn State offense is.
I cheated. I picked two. My breakout players are whoever starts at tight end.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I cheated a little bit there, but to me, I guess that was just the most logical route to go, right? I mean, you have two players who, you know, one of them has to start. Both of them are really exciting. So yeah, that was just kind of where my brain went.
So I don't blame you for that, by the way, because I do think that if you look at outside of Parker Washington and Jahan Dotson, the best talent on the roster is at tight end. If you're going to talk about receivers and breakout players there, between those two, I know you and I have talked about this before of is there an open competition? Doesn't matter because of the number of reps that we might see with two tight ends on the field. I'm going to pin you down here. Which guy is going to be your breakout player between Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange?
Oh man, I guess I'll go with Brenton Strange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because he's a year older. He's probably, I mean, nobody's said this. This is just a guess, but I would guess that he's probably a little bit more likely to play at this point. Although, you know, would it surprise me if Theo Johnson came out and won the job? Absolutely not. But if you're gonna pin me down, if you're gonna make me choose one, I'll go with Brenton Strange.
And by the way, when we're talking about these tight ends, these are former high school wide receivers. So these are guys that have receiver abilities and have grown into their body at 6'3" for Brenton Strange, 259, almost 260 some pounds. Same thing with Theo Johnson. One thing I talked about last week on the Daily Edition was I was a little disappointed last year when you look back and kind of you look back historically on the flexibility of usage in positional alignments when it comes to the skill position players. Now, last year was very tough for Penn State when it comes to the installation of the offense. I'm sure it wasn't fully installed last year, but Penn State had Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington lined up in basically the same spot, either out wide or in the slot for Washington, over 90% of the time. Parker Washington lined up 98% of his snaps in the slot. The only time that they were really flexible when it comes to where they lined up their players was that tight end position where they had some in the slot and some in line. And really, to me, that's not being flexible. That's just standard operating procedure. Do you think we'll see more flexibility and creativity with the deployment of those players with two tight ends? Do you think we're going to see guys lined up in the backfield? Do you think we'll see some split into unique situations with those two players?
Yeah, I do. Just because I think Mike Yursich is that kind of guy, right? I don't get the sense that Mike Yursich is very interested in the vanilla.
Yeah.
So I do think that Penn State is going to do some creative stuff. I think the tight end is the perfect place to do that, right? Because you've got two guys that you feel good about, two guys that are really good athletes, two guys that can do, more than one thing. So I do think that the tight end position is a great place to experiment because you've got two players who have amazing athletic profiles who you can catch the football. So I think that's a great spot to do some experimentation. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like because, look, Mike Yurcich has not given us very many hints this spring, and nor should he really if he's smart. So I don't have a great idea of what that's going to be, but I would not be surprised to see that at all.
So I agree with you there as far as the best place to do that is with the tight ends because you can line them up in a lot of different places. And if we're talking about breakout players on the offensive side of the ball, usage pattern and opportunity dictate a lot of that. And at this point, I'm with you. I can't pick a boundary receiver that I think has a legitimate shot from a talent perspective and for an opportunity perspective to make that impact. And I won't give away the full article, bwi.rivals.com, if you want to check out what Greg and Nate had to say on the subject. So you want to make sure you want to get the full perspective, go see the full article. We're just talking with Dave today about his particular players, but Greg and Nate made compelling cases for their two guys on the offensive side of the ball. But that flexibility you're talking about, the opportunity and the usage, I agree with you in that situation, but I'm going to go with a different player to be interesting. And this is where it's going to be more so breakout from a production standpoint, but not from a stat perspective, because all of you pick skill position players. But the guy that I'm banking on having a breakout season this year in all of my analysis is Juice Scruggs. I think he's going to slot into that right guard position, and he is going to be a standout player in this new zone scheme, but fans aren't going to notice. That's the biggest thing is like he might have a phenomenal game and you wouldn't even notice. So that's really, to me, you guys were right to pick those skill position players because one of them is going to break out. But you and I like the data and the analysis from PFF. So I'm going to be looking at Juice Scruggs' pass blocking efficiency. I'm going to be looking at his run blocking, his big time run potential. I think he can have some of those big dominant reps where he gets significant movement in the run game, and that athleticism, I think he can spring some of those backs in the second level by getting to linebackers and getting to those reach blocks and making sure he can seal off holes for those big physical running backs to run downhill through the middle. So to me, Juice Scruggs has the most opportunity and the most talent outside of the two guys that you picked as far as for his breakout season. Now, for what are you thinking about in terms of that offensive line interior position? Do you think he's going to get enough reps there for my prediction to come true?
I think so. James Franklin kind of left it more open than I thought he would when he was talking. Yeah. He named 8 or 9 guys that could start there. And he also kind of left the center position open. And I kind of thought that was Mike Miranda's to lose. So that was interesting. But yeah, I think that's a great pick. I think there's also a lot of truth to fans not realizing because for the first time in 3 years, last year, I watched all the games from home. And I have no idea. I had to look at PFF and rely on that stuff to tell you who was good on the offensive line because you can't see. You have no idea.
You don't have that third dimension. The offensive and defensive line, you don't realize how much they work in 3 dimensions because you see it just from this angle if you're on TV. Mm-hmm. So you don't see some of the movement that has to be made laterally. That's why when the NFL on Thursday night games, when they went to a couple times, they played the play live from the Skycam. I loved it, but I understand that it's so foreign to fans. But from the press box, you do get to see that kind of bird's eye view to see everything. So yeah, it's tough sometimes to actually see what's going on the offensive line.
Definitely. So, but yeah, I think Juice Scruggs is a great pick. I think he's huge. Look at him. He's one of the more physically imposing linemen that Penn State has. He's older. He's got some experience. I think that's a great pick.
Dave Eckert with me on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and to our YouTube page as we expand our coverage of not only Penn State football, but Penn State basketball, which we're going to get to a little bit with Dave. We're still going through our breakout candidates, offense and defense for the 2021 season. He has Bretton Strange or Theo Johnson?
It's or, I think.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's got Brenton Strange or Theo Johnson. Now we're going to go to the other side of the football, and this is the reason I wanted to have you on today, because, Dave, your pick for breakout player in 2021 on the Penn State defense is?
Brandon Smith.
Brandon Smith. Okay, tell me why.
It is. I think I'm really excited about his positional tweak, if you want to call it that. I think he moving from Sam to Will is. I'm just really excited to see how that works for him. It feels like it's the type of move that can really set him off. It's gonna let him play to his strengths. He's gonna be, closer to the line of scrimmage. He's gonna be able to use his physicality, his athleticism a little bit more. He's not gonna have the same kind of coverage responsibilities that he did last season. I just think this is really going to free him up and kind of maybe let him be that destroyer and really make some exciting plays. And I don't think Penn State's linebacker group has that. So I'm really excited to see what Brandon Smith does.
It's interesting because when I read Brandon Smith, it did two things in my brain. First off, I was like, didn't Brandon Smith already have a breakout season? But no, you're right. No, he didn't. He really did not break out in 2021. He was just on the field. And it got me thinking, Dave, how many players have already broken out for Penn State on defense? Like, the number of players that have played a lot so far is pretty high from this defense. So a lot of guys with experience or starting experience are returning. But I was trying to list the guys on defense that actually have broken out and you can really count on. And I think... correct me if there's anyone I've left off this list. Jaquan Brisker's the obvious one. Tariq Castro-Fields is a senior. He really, from a statistical perspective, has not broken out, but from a play perspective, he is obviously a known quantity and has broken out into that starter 1A corner position.
Right.
None of the linebackers. And I think if you count their previous experience, you know what you're getting from Derek Tangelo and from Arnold Ebiketie, and then obviously P.J. Mustipher at that defensive tackle position. Nobody else has had a breakout season. Now, some guys like Fred Hansard, I think you can take off the list of guys who might break out because we know what they are as far as their abilities, but Curtis Jacobs, Brandon Smith, maybe you put Ellis Brooks in that Fred Hansard position of a guy who's never really going to break out and be a star, but he's never had a breakout season. And then you look at the defensive ends, and they're entirely new people there as well, from what we've seen. So really, all the guys that you might think of as like known quantities, most of them haven't broken out yet, have they?
No. I think the only one that I might add is Joey Porter. I don't have his stats in front of me, but I was impressed just kind of with the eye test last year a little bit. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Penn State's defense is kind of maybe skating on the wrong path a little bit, just because we don't know. I think we're feeling a little bit too confident about Penn State's defense is what I'm trying to say here. Because there's a lot that we don't know, and what we do know might not be as great as we think it is.
Right.
They've got a great safety in Jaquan Brisker. They've got cornerbacks who are experienced, but we don't know what's going to happen with that other safety spot. The linebackers, they're Brandon Smith. Obviously, we're excited about that move. We're excited about Curtis Jacobs, but there's a bunch of guys that we haven't seen. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not saying that their defense is going to be bad or that we shouldn't be excited about these players, but I do think that there might be a little bit more potential for variation there. Than we're giving credit for.
Counting your ifs is what I called it last week. If you're counting your ifs, if Curtis Jacobs takes that step forward, if Brandon Smith does become that thumper in the box, if Ellis Brooks returns to being a viable starter at that middle linebacker position, if they can use Jesse Luketa in the proper way and hide his weaknesses, we're getting down a list of ifs, right? There's a long list of them on the Penn State defense, and there aren't a lot of really tangibly hard known facts about the players on that side of the ball. It was just an interesting thing. And you brought up Joey Porter Jr. Thank you, because that's a great transition into the guy that I was going to bring up as the breakout candidate, because he is one that we saw, as you said, the eye test was there for him last year, and there were plays that he gave up where I thought he made a good break on the ball. He just didn't quite get there in time. So there are plays that were super close, those almost misses of. And the one that is stuck in my brain is when he was following, I think it was Garrett Wilson down the field for what ultimately became a touchdown in the Ohio State game. Two things about that play. First off, it was a perfectly thrown pass by Justin Fields. It was exactly where it needed to be. It was a great play by the receiver who went up through contact to get the ball, and Joey Porter Jr., the only thing he didn't do right on that play was get his hands between that of him and the receiver. And that is, again, that's the hardest part, and that's the part that may never come for some guys. But he did, physically, he did everything right to be there with an all Big Ten, All-American receiver down the field. It's just that last part. And I think this year you'll see, with the confidence and an extra year and, I don't know, spring practice and fall camp, you might see an improved play from and more stability from everybody on the defensive side of the ball, especially some of those young guys. You might see that step forward. Honorable mention, by the way, that I want to bring up because you got to have two offensive players. I think Johnny Dixon is super talented. And if he can assimilate himself quickly into this defense, I do think he has the ability to be not only a boundary corner, but that guy that kicks in the slot and challenges Daquan Hardy for some of those nickel reps, pushing Hardy to more of that specialist dime role or even a really good depth player where they're rotating at that slot corner position, because Johnny Dixon, 6 foot, almost 190, physical, long, former high 4-star. You can then have three of those guys on the field at the same time if you're Penn State when it comes to that cornerback position. So I'm going to double dip, and I'm going to say either of those guys might be the guy at the corner position.
I think those are great picks. I'm excited about Johnny Dixon too. I'm excited about the corner position in general.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really intriguing athletes. And James Franklin at Big Ten Media Days, he said, I think this is the best secondary that we've had at Penn State since he got here. And, it takes a lot for James Franklin to say that kind of stuff. He doesn't like to make those kind of declarations. So when he says that type of thing, kind of like what he did with Kalen King this spring. When he said, hey, Kalen King's the most advanced corner we've had as a freshman. Excuse me, the most advanced freshman we've had at Penn State. And you have to listen when he says that kind of stuff because he doesn't say it that often.
Especially for individual players. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we have a really cool thing going on here at Blue White Illustrated. The season is just around the corner, and we want to kick it off the right way for you. If you sign up right now with our fall camp special, use promo code BWI60, you get 2 months free of Blue White Illustrated, your access to Rivals, 2 months free with the promo code BWI60, so that you can read articles like our insider stuff. You can get onto the message board, see some of the inside information, things that Nate Bauer finds out about when it comes to Penn State practice and to Penn State football. He gave us some great insight into what was going on with Sean Clifford this offseason, what he's heard from his sources. You can get all that information first if you sign up for Blue White Illustrated. Again, the fall camp special, as you can see here. You get 2 months free. So if you do it right now, that takes you through the end of October. Actually, the middle of November at this point. That's the whole season. You can get the season for free. Dave, help me with this. But tell me, what's going on with you at Blue White Illustrated today on bwi.rivals.com. Give them a taste of what they might be able to find if they sign up with the promo code BWI60.
So I'm going to have an interview with Evan Mahafy's coach. I think we'll get to Evan Mahafy in a second. He's Penn State's newest basketball commit. So you can get that there. I'm going to be looking at how some of the guys in the NFL have done in this first week of preseason here. But yeah, it's great because look, we have some guys, especially guys like Nate, Ryan Snyder, Greg Pickle, who, I mean, they've been doing this for a long time, and they know people. They can get you some really nice information that not that many other people have access to. So I would really recommend signing up because that's how you get everything you need to know about Penn State football. You're not going to miss on anything if you're a premium member. So that's my best advertisement. I'm not the professional here, but
You did a great job. I set the hook. You pulled the fish in. That's all we need.
very
By the
nice.
way, wrapping up things here on football before we move to basketball, couple of things. Again, if you want more of Dave's work, it is here in the 2021 preview issue. I've got it open here to a great profile on JUCO defensive lineman Jordan Vandenberg that you wrote, including a interview with his former coach at Iowa Directional Community College. I will always say directional because I get it wrong every time, and that's on me. But here, the Blue White Illustrated Season Preview Guide. We're in the middle of camp, so there's still all kinds of great information in the preview guide. It is 166 pages, full-color magazine, comprehensive guide to the Nittany Lions' upcoming season, packed with exclusive content, interviews, features, opinions, and analysis from people like Dave. 1-800-421-7751 or bluewhiteonline.com. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you right now, so, just this is for your information. The next issue is also out right now. This one is packed with Olympic information and more training camp information and updates. What else we got in here, Dave, on the latest edition that dropped last Friday of Blue White Illustrated?
Yeah, I've got a story in there ranking the best 25 players on Penn State's roster. So if you want to find something to yell at me about, great material there. There's lots of great stuff in there. We've got some recruiting stuff in there as well. Lots of recruiting stuff, actually. But yeah, everything you need, all the information, and like I said, something to yell at me about. So I think that's what's important here.
Yeah, it's a lot of recruiting information. There's a quick breakdown of all the Penn State commits that I've done so far with T. Frank's Film Room as well. So if you want to get a condensed version all in one spot to see what I've said about the Penn State commits for the class of 2022, that's in there as well. Speaking of the class of 2022, before we get to that, any last thoughts on Penn State football training camp, what you saw last week when we were at practice? Because you were there as well, so I want to give you the floor. Anything that stood out to you, anything that you want to talk about that we haven't covered so far?
I would just say that I was really impressed by new safeties coach Anthony Poindexter. I thought his energy was, that's kind of a cliche, right? People talk about energy. Yeah, this guy has great energy. And you're just kind of like, as a reporter, you're like, okay, sure, whatever. But it was real with him. Like he was very, very, very energetic. You could just tell that he's very commanding.
Yeah.
I was impressed. I was just impressed. I think that's one thing that we haven't really talked about that, maybe we could cover, but yeah, I think we've touched on it all. I think we covered it here. So yeah.
Charismatic is, I think, the way I would describe him, because I had this conversation with Nate yesterday. So this is now three people confirming what you just said about Anthony Poindexter and his command of his position group. We were watching him do drills, and I was paying attention. So we're all doing our thing, and we're supposed to be focused behind our cameras and getting as much stuff to share with you, the listener, as possible, and you, the viewer. But I kept being a football player. I kept listening to what he was saying, and I'm like, yeah, I totally get how to wrap up and tackle. Yeah, I want to try. He has a way of drawing you in. He has a way of making it engaging if you're there trying to learn, and to pierce through the fatigue of when you're in the middle of doing that. I imagine that's super helpful. But I want to move on now and get a hoops update, because last week there was another movement in the class of 2022, but not for football. It was Evan Mahaffey, 6'6", 185-pound point guard. Tell us a little bit about his commitment to the Nittany Lions class of 2022 for Penn State basketball.
Yeah, so he's Penn State's second commit in the class of 2022. He's, like you said, he's lanky. He's really athletic. He's a 3-star prospect. I think he probably would have been in the Rivals 150 if he played on the summer AAU circuit. He didn't. He had surgery on a torn meniscus, so he didn't really get that chance to kind of stand out, I guess. But yeah, he's going to be an asset for Penn State for sure. He's really versatile. That's kind of the word that everybody likes to use about him. I was just, like I mentioned, I did an interview with his coach, and his coach told me that he led his team in blocks last season, and that's playing with. I think there were three other Division I players on his team
Okay.
at Muller in Cincinnati. Yeah, he plays for this ridiculous powerhouse program down there. But yeah, he's really. I think he's going to be an asset. He joins Kanye Clary. I think Penn State probably views him a little bit more as a wing than a true point guard. I think Kanye Clary is probably their true point guard in this class. But yeah, definitely an exciting prospect for Penn State basketball fans for sure.
So that was going to be my next question. As far as at 6'6", he probably has some versatility position-wise. So listed as a shooting guard by Rivals, 3-star shooting guard. Are we going to see him more there, do you think? Or is that versatility mean he could line up anywhere from 2 through 4? Like, what sort of what can Penn State fans expect from him on the court when it comes to maybe where his usage is for the most part?
I would expect if you want to put that label, I think the 2 is probably
Okay.
it. I think I'm not sure what to expect from Penn State in this regard, just because we haven't gotten a ton from Micah Shrewsbury on this. But talking to Evan, the way that he explained what Shrewsbury pitched to him was a system where there are 4 ball handlers around 1 big.
Okay.
And all of those guys can handle the ball. They can all shoot the ball. They can bring the ball up. And I don't want to say it's interchangeable because that's not what he said, but that's maybe it's going to be flexible. It's not going to be a rigid, or the point guard carries the ball up. The point guard, I don't get the vibe that that's what it's going to be. Just talking to some of these guys. So I think Evan is going to be, he's going to be an asset. He's going to be able to do a lot of things. He's going to fit that flexibility really well. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
We're talking with Dave Eckert, Blue White Illustrated reporter, and he's one of our Hoops Insiders with Nate Bauer. I want to ask you something for people who have been kind of checking in and out with the basketball program. Here's an interesting question. Who's left? Like, what of... And I mean that jokingly, but I mean that seriously, as somebody who has followed Penn State basketball in the past, and somebody who, kind of checked out once football season started. I'm not quite sure I know who's left on the roster and what to expect from this class, in 2021, not just the recruiting class, but, the roster in general. So can you please give us a rundown of who's left on the roster, what to expect from the team, and who you think the starters might be returning, starting with, what's left for Penn State after all the tumultuous transition they've had since 2020?
Sure. I think there was no 2021 recruiting class, so that's easy. We got that out of the way.
Woo! I didn't miss anything. Good. Oh.
That was a tough one. But yeah, the big one is John Harrow. That's he's the big guy. He's the guy who's in the middle. He's the guy who works hard. He's the guy who everybody loves. So that's I think his return is really, really important because he's the kind of guy that can be the foundation for a program, right? He's the guy who he's going to establish the locker room that you want. He's
a bedrock sort of player. He's the guy that
Absolutely.
maybe he's not the most talented, but he's going to stabilize everything for the talented players. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Definitely. That's so that's a huge get. Another guy like John Harrow who entered the transfer portal but elected to come back is Seth Lundy. He's very talented. Penn State fans who watched last season will know that he didn't really put it all together, but he's the type of guy who definitely can. He had some huge games. You look at Miles Dredd, he's back. Then you start to look at some of the guys who they added in the transfer portal. Jalen Pickett, really good career at Siena, I believe. He's was one of the more sought after guards in the transfer portal. He's going to be a real asset for Penn State. Then you look at Greg Lee, who is a guy that Penn State is really excited about. He's a forward who can shoot a little bit. He's not super bulky, but he's lanky. So he's going to be really interesting. I'm curious to see where they put him. I'm not totally sure what they're going to do with him. So yeah, Jaheim Cornwall, another guy they added, Giovanni Scott. So there's not a ton of familiar names returning. They lost Myron Jones, they lost Jamari Wheeler, They lost a lot. They lost to Isaiah Brockington, too, even though it looked like he was going to come back at one point. He had actually announced that he was going to come back at one point, but he's at Iowa State now. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting because there are going to be a ton of new pieces here. And it's going to be... Micah Shrewsbury has some talent to work with here. It's not barren. I think he did a pretty good job in the transfer portal given the situation that he was handed. So, yeah, it's going to be an intriguing season. I wouldn't be expecting huge things, but I'm not really expecting them to go and lose by 25 every game that they play, as you might ordinarily expect for a team that lost 3 of its best players. Yeah.
And the guys that come back, what you described, what Micah Shrewsbury is looking for is 4 ball handlers around a big. Seth Lundy being 6'7", 6'8", having that sort of profile. Add him into this mix here, and I think you're right. I think that kind of makes sense for him as far as a schematic and sort of team-building perspective. So Micah Shrewsbury getting him back, if they can hit that high side of his skill, absolutely is a win for the program. And I think a critical one, because if you were only bringing back John Harrah, that bedrock is great, but you need something to put on top of it. Like, you need to put a building on it. You can't just have the bedrock. It's great. You laid the foundation, but you kind of need a house on top of the foundation. So having those skilled players around him, and I don't mean to diminish what John Harrah can do, but he has never been in his career an offensive weapon. He needs to, get the ball and get it out to people on rebounds and stuff like that. So I think that is a promising start for Micah Shrewsbury and his ability to keep those players at Penn State. So any final thoughts on Penn State basketball as we wrap up the BWI Daily Edition today?
I would just say that I think you made an excellent point there about you can't just have guys that try hard.
Yeah.
Right? You just can't. Pat Chambers tried to do that for a while, and breaking news: Penn State basketball didn't get good until Penn State basketball had good players. So, it's important. That's why what Penn State is doing in the recruiting market, or recruiting trail. Sorry, it's not a market. Matters right now. So it's going to be interesting just to see where this goes, and I think it's worth following. Even if you're a casual Penn State fan, this is the stuff that's going to make or break the program for the next few years. It's not nothing. It matters. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Dave Eckert with us here at David Eckert 98. You see there under his video here on the screen. But if you're listening on our podcast and you want to follow him for hoops news and stuff like that, as well as his impressions of Penn State football in training camp, at David Eckert 98. Thanks for coming on today with me, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate it, T. Frank. Anytime.
So don't forget, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page, or as I just mentioned, our podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And to answer your question, we are working our butts off to get on Apple Podcast. I'll just say it's not on our end. We have been hounding Apple to get us on Apple Podcasts. So I think from what the information was last week, we've made some breakthroughs. So coming soon to Apple Podcasts, but wherever else you get your podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you get your podcasts, we're there. And of course, if you want to see the full show, it's on YouTube, bwi.rivals.com, to subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, and you get 2 months free with the promo code BWI60. I know I threw a lot of stuff there at you at the end, but the easiest way is just whenever you see Blue White Illustrated, just hit the subscribe button. Just bam, it's just a reactionary thing going forward. So I'm Thomas Frank Carr, your host of the Daily Edition. We'll be back again tomorrow.